I definitely enjoyed that too much. What is going on, guys? We've got another podcast for you today. We've got Tommy Pickles, Phil, and Chucky. The Rugrats, all grown up, are here. The three Beardmigos are at it again. We're going to talk about a specific topic later that we kind of leaked last week. But first, we've been talking about cartoons this morning as we hung out for a little while. So we're going to give you our top three cartoons of all time. And then you at home are going to drop your top three cartoons in the comments, and you're going to tell us why ours are right or wrong. So who's got theirs ready and wants to kick it off?
Was the elder statesman here? I feel like I can go now. Mine are.
Take us way back down memory lane.
Let me take you back to the Depression, kids. No,
Andy was bringing up cartoons we've never even heard before. We're like, what?
Right. I'm going to throw out the original Ninja Turtle cartoons from the late 80s, early 90s. I've got the original X-Men cartoon. And then I got the Rugrats, man. You can't beat that
Classic
nonsense. And there's an honorable mention, because I couldn't leave this out, would be the Thundercats.
There you go.
Cats were awesome.
Andy really is Chucky Finster come to life. He's got the red beard and the glasses. This is Chucky all grown up, man. So, Josh, you want to go next?
If I grew my hair out longer, it would.
Yeah, I'll go next. Let's see. My favorite cartoon of all time probably would have to be Avatar: The Last Airbender. I mean, there's just nothing better than Avatar: The Last Airbender in the history of cartoons, personally. I'm probably going to go with Rocket Power after that. Because I love Rocket Power.
Also a great intro theme song is Rocket Power.
Also a great intro.
Full disclosure, I don't know what Rocket Power is.
Oh, man, it was a show about these kids that, like...
Did they live in, like, California, you think?
Yeah,
maybe?
like Santa Monica or Santa Barbara or something like that. And they would skate. Do all kinds of, like, surf and...
Yeah, it was like extreme sports, but they did all of it, and they were kids.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to have to go with, in my third spot, the Pokemon cartoon.
Yeah.
So, a little Pikachu, Ash.
I've never seen those either.
So our ages are being revealed because mine are very similar to Josh's. Though I got to say, from each of you guys' lists is one honorable mention for me. Rugrats and Pokemon are both very close options as honorable mention, but they did not quite make the top three. The top, because Nintendo. Because at number three,
you talk about Pokemon all the time, and you can't even put in your top three.
You know,
the games,
you play Pokemon all the time. You love Pokemon, and yet when the rubber meets the road, you betray Pokemon.
My love of Pokemon.
Bandwagon fan. That's what you are. You're a
bandwagoner. You probably like Golden State too.
I didn't even get to say my list, you guys. You guys are being total Tommy and Chucky. Gosh. This classic.
I'll go ahead and let you finish, but Pokemon had the best top three cartoon of all time.
I like what you did there. That was nice.
Thank you, Yeezy. I guess I'll do my list. Number three is Fairly Odd Parents. Got no mention from you guys, but that show was funny. You got to flex your imagination, thinking about all the things you'd do if you had godparents to grant you wishes. Just a great show. Number two, this is why Josh is calling me a traitor. Number two, best cartoon of all time is Digimon. And
you see why he's a traitor?
Often lovingly referred to as the Pokemon knockoff. But I can't help it. It had a better story. It was just more fun to watch.
So again, this is going to show my age a little bit. Were Digimon and Pokemon not the same?
No, Andy. They were not the same thing. Similar concepts. You got to befriend little monsters, and they would grow and become powerful. But one had a story and one didn't. So,
yeah.
But number one, as much as I really hate to agree with Josh, number one is absolutely Avatar: The Last Airbender. Great show. Awesome for adults or kids. Hit like some real issues. Super just fun, really cool animation, really funny, witty humor. And it even had a spin-off series that was also pretty good. And the reason we got talking about cartoons is because that just came to Netflix, and me and Josh were fangirling over Avatar, and Andy hasn't seen it, so you guys need to just blow Andy up and message him and tell him how much he needs to watch it with his kids, man. Because it'd be a whole family experience, man.
I guess I could watch that tomorrow
Yeah.
while I'm working.
You can't argue with the family time thing. It'll bring you closer as a family.
You know.
But me and Rachel and my cats can watch it too. So.
You and those cats, man. I worry about it.
But in all seriousness, you really need to watch Avatar. Like, we're not just saying this.
Yeah, that's
it's
what today's
awesome.
podcast is. How does Avatar: The Last Airbender compare to the Bible? I'm just kidding. That's not what today's about. But
well, Aang is clearly the Messiah figure.
Yeah.
And Korra is well, not Korra.
I do think that we should do a couple pods down the road of the theology of certain shows.
Yeah. Hey, pop culture Bible.
I have a Bible study that when my youth group gets a little older, I think I might do, but it's the theology of The Office.
Dude.
Wait, The Office has theology?
I mean, yeah, it can if you look at it the right way. So
I'm intrigued.
I mean, I'm all about finding Jesus in places that you wouldn't think you'd find Jesus.
Yeah, man. He's always trying to teach us a lesson. I love it. Well, yeah, pop culture Bible. You guys leave us some recommendations of what we should dig into and look for some theology in. So, boom, that'd be super fun.
Anyway, not to blow up or derail where we're going. Y'all can have the stage back.
But to blow up and derail where we're going.
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say maybe we should remind last week's topic and show the lead into this. So, Josh, you want to recap?
Yeah. So last week we talked about the question of why should we read the Bible? You grow up and you hear your pastors, maybe your parents, your friends telling you that you need to read the Bible, and maybe you were wondering, why should I read that Bible? And if you haven't listened to that podcast, what you should do right now is you should pause this podcast, go back and listen to that one, like and subscribe down below.
Are we going to pause for them now?
No, we're going to pause. Welcome back, now that you've seen the podcast. This is the Three Beardmigos with Bible Part Dose.
If you will.
Yeah, the sequel to the Bible, which sounds heretical, but it's not. Because
make sure we don't listen to this.
Instead of telling you why you should read the Bible, we want to give you some helpful tips on how to better read the Bible, because we understand from our own personal experience that it can be hard to read the Bible. It can be hard to get into the Bible. Maybe you don't know where to start. Maybe you don't know how you should be reading it. Maybe you don't know anything about it. So how do you start? Well, last week we talked about how it's the Word of God, how it's useful for your life. And so today we want to give you really a few points on maybe a few helpful tips on how to read it. So I'm going to toss it over to Andy.
Yep, Andy, down.
Well, I think I don't know where I'm at on y'all screen.
Oh yeah, we're at different spots.
He's upper left for those watching at home.
Oh yeah, okay.
I'm on the beach. So the first thing you need to do is to have a plan. Like, you can't just randomly pick up a Bible. You could, but stop there. But you need to have some sort of plan and a strategy behind it. So, for example, our church during quarantine, like, how do we stay connected? Well, let's read our word together. Well, how do we do that? And so we have just decided we're going to do one psalm a day as a church. And so the youth group, they're going along with us. And so each day we, at some point during that day, we stop and read a psalm. We are on Psalm 62 today, so that should let you know how long we've been in quarantine. But
Wow.
and then at the end of the week, at least the youth group, when we get together, it's, hey, what did you get out of those 7 psalms that you read this past week? So yeah, the starting point of this is, 1, have a Bible, and 2, what's your plan? What do you guys do for plans?
Yeah.
Are you a Bible in a year kind of guy, or are you book by book? What are we doing?
I do want to, real quick, before we go on that, Andy said something that's really important. If you don't have a Bible and you want one, ask. If you're in any one of our youth groups, you can ask one of us, and I'm sure we'd be happy to get you a Bible. Or if you go to a church, I'm sure if you want to start reading the Bible and you don't have one, ask someone, and they'll give it to you. We love giving Bibles to people as pastors. And so, like Andy said, the first thing is you really need a Bible.
Yeah.
So if you don't have one, ask.
Yeah.
And I'm all for the Bible app. I think that's great.
Yeah.
But there's something different about having a hard copy, right? You can take your notes in it, underline, write, circle, highlight, all of that stuff. So, I mean, I'm not knocking it. The Bible app is great. I use that a lot in church.
Because you can do all that on the app too.
But
I get what you mean.
Yeah, it's
there's something different about just holding a book in your hand.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think having both is awesome.
It's more tangible, I think, to have like a physical copy, personally.
Yeah, and we spend so much time typing as it is. I think there's something special about writing that does kind of make it stick with you. And to go along with having a plan, which is just an awesome tip, is when you go through that book, if you pick a specific book, or I'm going to go through this specific section, asking yourself, what's the purpose of this, to kind of go along with the plan. Am I reading this book to see, in what way God was speaking to his people at the time, or am I reading through this book to see some practical applications for myself at this time? Having something as part of your plan that you really want to gain out of it, I think really helps you, because then you're looking for things like that too. Like Andy's church, going through the Psalms. So a cool thing would be hey, as I go through the Psalms, I want to look at the different emotions that we see throughout that. And you might pick up a lot more personal of a thing seeing what the writers are going through.
Well, it is
just another thing.
I mean, we'll just throw my question away. Thanks, guys. But going with what you said, my youth group is going through the book of Acts. We've been going through the book of Acts since July, and we're on Acts 11. But in the very beginning, it was important that they understood, why are we going through Acts? Well, we're a small youth group. We're going to run this like a church plant. This is what the original church looked like. That's why we're doing it. And 2, who wrote the book? What was the purpose of the book?
Mm-hmm.
Why did they write it? Things of that sort are super easy they're not easy, but they're super helpful to know, because it puts things in context a little better. Psalms, the book of Psalms, it's poetry. It's literal songs that they sing. And so each one has a different meaning, whether it's a lament or a praise or a prayer, whatever. It's important to know when you're reading what each one of those means. It's important to know that Luke wrote Acts to show us the beginning of the church. Things of that sort. There are a bunch of different resources you can use. I just got some stuff for our youth group that it's one page for each book of the Bible, and it tells you when it was written, why it was written, who it was written by, and key points in that book. So, I mean, there are all kinds of resources out there for that.
So that's so tip 1 was have a plan. Tip 2 that just got brought up. We got 5, and the order really doesn't matter. Tip 2 that Andy led into was context matters. So Josh,
Yeah.
did you have anything to put in on that?
Yeah, guys, it really is important to try to understand what a particular verse is trying to say, because it's really easy for us, I think, sometimes to read things in the Bible and we think, oh man, this seems really, useful for me. This seems really important. This seems really whatever. And those things are important. They are true. But the context changes things. If you take one verse and you just read it and you're like, oh man, I really like what the Bible is saying this. It's just like cherry picking. Like if you're having a conversation with someone and you just take one thing that they say and say, well, I can't believe this person said this, and ignore the context of why it was said, then you're probably going to feel differently about the text or about the statement. Like if you're in an argument and they said, oh, they called me a mean word, but you had just got done saying 50 mean things to the person, right? You're going to make that person seem like a really bad person, even though maybe it was somewhat you earned it, right? And I'm not saying the Bible's saying bad words. Don't mistake me, right? But the context is key. That's something I was taught in Bible college, was that context is key. It changes things. It's really important for us to try and understand why the Bible is saying some of the things that it's saying.
Yeah.
Well, and then you look at it, talking about cherry picking verses and whatnot. One of the most misquoted books or verses in the Bible is Philippians 4:13.
Mm-hmm.
All things through Christ Jesus. That's not saying you can jump off a roof and fly. Like,
It's not.
It's not. No, but I mean,
There go my afternoon plans.
I know, right? I just saved you a broken leg. You're welcome. But it's not saying that you can do things like that. What it is saying is, if God is going to make a way for something to happen, it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
So context is key. There's a video that Cool Carl did on context with Philippians 4:13, and it's pretty hilarious. I would recommend going to YouTube and finding that.
And that's not us saying that there aren't personal applications when you read the Bible. That's us saying, though, that when you read it in the context, that it becomes even better and that it means even more than kind of the shallow version of what a lot of times it will mean. There's still going to be a personal impact that you're going to get reading something that someone else may not. That's why having discussions is big. One more thing on context before we move on, since we're talking about tips and tools that I got told when I was pretty young, is that a lot of times if you read something and you find it a little hard to understand, a lot of times just backing up, just like say you'd read Philippians 4:13 and you're like, well, how is that not what that means? Well, if you back up and start at Philippians, just the start of it, 4, and read through that, you kind of start to realize what it's talking about leading into that. So you back yourself up, you gain some more information, and then kind of like Josh and Andy said, you're not just taking one little part, you're taking it as a whole, and then you're getting a lot more out of that. Because verses, they weren't even originally a thing. It was just written all as a thought, and we're the ones who put in verses. And so sometimes that makes us think it's a separate thing, but it all goes together. So do you guys have more on that, or do we want to hop into tip 3?
I say we go to 3 unless Josh has got something.
Well, no. Okay. So it's 3-2 now?
3 is 2. Yeah.
Okay. Kind of going off what Ben just said, to go into point 3, it's really important, I think, to have someone that you can study with. Having a study partner, maybe, or a youth pastor, or a parent, or a mentor, or someone that you can read something through with. Because if you're reading the Bible like me, there's often times that arise where I have some questions about something that the Bible says. Because, I mean, let's be honest, the Bible can be confusing. sometimes. It can say some things that seem a little weird. And it's really important and helpful for us to try and understand why the Bible's saying what it says. To try and understand the context, right? And you might not know the context, but someone else does. So maybe you can ask them. Or like Ben said, sometimes you're going to take something away from the Bible that I don't. But you telling me what you took away and me telling you what I took away can be really helpful. Can be really beneficial, because the Bible, like we talked about last week, is God's voice. He speaks to us through it, and he's telling us different things at different times in our life. And so it's really important for God's people to communicate about that as well, because God can be communicating to us differently than maybe he's communicating to someone else.
I think it's important to remember too, like, don't be afraid to ask questions. I'm 35, and I still am going over to my senior pastor here in the church when I'm here. And I'm like, hey, let's talk through this. You know, this is what I got out of it, and this is what somebody else is getting. Where do they mesh? Where do they fall apart? So, for example, the other day on the radio, I was coming in and I heard somebody quote something and say, you know, kind of interpret that in a certain way, and I didn't necessarily agree with it. And so rather than just assuming they're wrong and I'm right, you know, I went to Dave and I was like, hey, Dave, look, this is what I heard. This is what I think. Am I right? Am I wrong? Let's work through this. So yeah, just don't be afraid to ask. Don't look stupid.
Yeah.
Dave is 102 years old. Don't tell him I said that. But, you know, he still asks questions of people. I mean, it's something you're never fully there. You could read through the Bible 10, 12 times and you're still going to have questions and you're still going to be confused.
Yeah.
Some of the smartest theologians in the history of the world have had questions. And it's okay to have those.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, especially human nature, you know, when we first start things, we ask a lot of questions. And then it seems like kind of the more we get going, we're like, well, I got a pretty good grasp on this. I feel like I'm starting to become an expert of this. And so sometimes even pride can seek its way in there and be like, I really don't need to ask people stuff anymore. I understand this now. And I feel like you miss out on a lot if you think that way, because that's the whole reason we all have different ways of thinking and different points of view, is because some of us think and really connect with a literary type thing. And some people are really interested in history. And some people have a very psychological way of thinking. And some people really love science. And together through all that, you kind of are getting all these different perspectives that connect the whole part of meaning together. And yeah, it doesn't even have to be someone doing the study with you. Say you are going through and you're reading the Gospels. You start with the book of Matthew, and someone might not be reading that daily with you, but that's still a good idea to ask questions when you get confused. And even further than questions is to have discussions. I liked what you said, Andy, about sometimes you hear something you don't agree with, and it's so easy to just dismiss that, but you gain so much more by questioning things and having discussions with people and looking and realizing sometimes I was wrong in the way I understood something. There might be more to it, and you gain so much more knowledge and wisdom by that.
As a Christian, we should be very humble in ourselves, and we should be able to admit that we're wrong.
Yeah.
Which is completely contradictory to our human nature.
Yeah.
My 6-year-old can come to me and say something, and I can, no, you're wrong. And then he tells me I'm wrong, and I'm going to lose my stuff, because how dare you tell me I'm wrong, when in all actuality, 5 minutes later, he was right and I was wrong. So, I mean, it's completely against human nature to be okay with being wrong, or to admit that you don't know something. But, you know, Jesus doesn't call us to live in human nature. Jesus calls us to live in humility. I mean, I believe we've talked about this before. So, humble yourself and be willing to admit, okay, I was wrong on that. Or just like a lot of times the three of us will talk, and I'll humble myself and admit that you guys are wrong. So,
has that happened?
I don't think
Did I miss that? Are you kidding me?
I'm
pretty sure Andy's the one that's been wrong a couple times, right?
When I've admitted that you guys were wrong, it was hard for me to admit that y'all were wrong with the cartoon.
Man, that was great of you to do that, though. So.
I appreciate your appreciation.
Quick recap. Tip number 1 was to have a plan. Tip number 2 is that context matters. Tip number 3 is have a study partner or ask questions. And I feel like what Andy said, kind of, we're going out of order, but we decided ahead of time. The order didn't really matter. So going on what Andy said, I feel like it'd be good to go into tip 4 to say to read the Bible through a fresh lens. So many times, like, you go into a situation with a bias ahead of time. Like, if someone talks about baseball, my first thought, we're all going to have different first thoughts. Ben's first thought is going to be the St. Louis Cardinals are the greatest team. And Josh is going to say, I'm pretty sure that's the Cincinnati Reds. And Andy's going to say, oh, hold up. You guys are forgetting about the Atlanta Braves. And we've already got this bias heading into baseball, right? When in all reality, the best team is who won the World Series last year. None of our teams, right? So anyway, but
you're very hateful today, Ben.
I had to burn all of us at once. But anyway, when you go in and read the Bible, it's so easy to be like, oh, I've read this chapter before. I know what this means. And I feel like when you do that, you're missing out on learning something new by already having in mind what it's going to say, rather than just having a fresh, clear mind and just taking in what God had people write and what God's saying.
I think to go along with that, a lot of times, especially students more than adults, but even adults, they will blindly follow what the pastor says. So if I'm standing up teaching my youth group, they're going to take what I'm saying for gold. But it's okay to check us.
Yeah.
If we're teaching you something and you read through it and you're like, are you interpreting that the right way? It's perfectly fine. Like, I don't know many pastors who aren't okay with being checked like that.
Yeah.
Because we have our predispositions just like you do. So it's good to go into it with a clear head and new lens.
Yeah, the biggest thing I can encourage someone, I had a professor who I got to Bible college, and it was like my freshman year, whatever there. And at our school, there were a couple topics that were somewhat controversial. We'll say that. We won't get into it. But people were arguing. People were debating. And my professor just said quite simply, okay, look, here's what I want you guys to do. I want everyone to go home, and I want you to, here's a bunch of verses that talk about this topic, and I want you to let the Bible speak for itself. Don't bring your bias into it. Don't bring what you already think into it. Try not to think about this in any way except what the Bible itself is saying. Because when we bring in other stuff, when we bring in our biases, when we bring in our preconceived notions, we're kind of interpreting God's voice in a way that God maybe doesn't want his voice to be interpreted. And so I think it's really important for us to pause and to take a moment and to just listen to what the Bible is saying.
Yeah.
Read a verse, try to understand the context, and then let God speak. Because I feel that if you do that, your interpretation of Scripture is going to change. Because we all, every single one of us, bring our own preconceived ideas to the table.
Yep. I mean, yeah, we're all unique. We're all unique thinkers, and human nature, kind of like we've already said, is to think we're right, and sometimes we're not. But uniqueness it's a beautiful thing that it should be celebrated by everyone, and we should, with that in mind, we should listen to each other and tackle this as a team instead of just trying to be right. So, one of you guys want to bring up the final tip of 5?
Yeah, I think last but certainly not least, I mean, there are so many different versions of the Bible. You know, you've got KJV, New King James, ESV, NIV, you know, HIJK, LMNOP, all of these different
Good
versions.
one.
I appreciate it.
QRS, TUV, WX, Y, and Z.
Oh,
Now,
that one. No, that one's way off.
but you have to find, assuming it's a credible version. You don't want Jimmy's version down the street, but you know, find an interpretation that you read,
Wow.
and follow.
At
Yeah,
Jimmy
against
next
Jimmy.
time. Yeah, at Jimmy next time, man. Come on now.
Sorry,
Poor guy.
I should have tagged him.
Getting put on. Poor Jimmy getting put on the blast, man.
That's twice today. I think I've put him on blast. But I was telling the fellas in our pre-show meeting, you know, I read a lot in the ESV and in the Holman Standard. Those are two versions that I'm comfortable with, and so that's what I study in, and that's what I teach from. You know, other people may, you know, they're NIV only, or you know, stuff like that. So find a version, a credible translation of the Bible, and then along with that, I would recommend the study Bibles. They're a little bigger and whatnot, and maybe that's not the one that you haul back and forth to church, but there's so many notes and applications at the bottom or in the middle, depending on the one, that you can use and will help you in your studying. You know, I referenced in the beginning about our going through the book of Psalms, and that has helped me immensely. You know, reading through those, seeing that it points back to things that have happened, you know, in Samuel and in Judges and this and that and all this other stuff. So that's my spiel on that.
Yeah. Finding your version that really clicks with how you speak and think, I think, is really important. One version to someone might be an amazing version, like Andy said, ESV. And by the way, I think it'd be cool if all three of us gave recommendations just for people to check out. Andy said ESV and Holman Christian Standard Bible, and I think ESV is a really good version. But when I try to read it, it doesn't really click with me super well. I feel like it almost talks differently from how I think. Like I'm trying to read Jedi Master Yoda talking to me, like it just feels backwards. But to some people, that's what feels like, that's what seems the best. That's what seems to speak in a way that seems really clear to them to where they can understand. And so that's why I think it is important to find one that you really like. I really love the NLT, and I think there's a lot of great versions out there, but I just feel like every time I read that, it's just what I'm reading seems to click with the way I think, and it really helps for me understanding what I'm taking in. Josh, do you have anything on?
I personally really prefer the New American Standard Bible, but that's more of a like literal translation. So it's closer to the original language, but it makes it a little harder to read. I'd probably just recommend like a NIV or a ESV for someone that's just kind of starting out. Something that's a little easier to understand, but still is a faithful translation. Not to get too deep into the weeds, but the Bible version that you can read, there's kind of a scale. There's like the Message is over here, and like the New American Standard Version's over here, where the Message is really like not literal, but it's more of like a translation into like modern, and then the New American is one of the more literal, and then like the NIV is in the middle, where it's kind of half and half, literal, and then also they make it easier to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd pick something more in the middle for someone who's kind of starting off, something that's easy to understand, but still is a pretty faithful translation of text. But really, what I'd recommend is just get the Bible app on your phone and read a couple verses in multiple translations and see which one you like. Which one speaks better to you? Because ultimately, the Bible is God talking to you. And so you want to make sure you have something that works for you, something that fits for you.
Yep. So let's recap the 5 points we gave you guys. And go ahead. Go ahead.
This is kind of what Josh was talking about. This.
Look at Andy getting fancy.
I know, right? I try. These types of translations, word for word, thought for thought, or paraphrase, and so.
Yeah, that's basically the chart.
So what it is.
You can see the NIV is right there in the middle, New American Standards over here, and the Message is over there. So.
And then there's even more that aren't on, that list. There's so many, and it can be overwhelming. But just know that there's one that's going to be great for you. Some people will tell you, hey, no, this is the one you should be doing because it's the best. And we just got to remember all of these have been, translated by men and women, by human beings, so there's going to be mistakes everywhere. And that's why we just have each other to try to help each other get the best scope of things. So, but yeah, the 5 points we went today. And this is, we've talked and planned what we think are some good points. This isn't just Ben, Andy, and Josh. This is stuff that we've heard from people people who we look up to, who have great wisdom, have told us for pointers in the past. So this is really more than just the Beardmigos giving you tips. This is a lot of collective people who have spent a lot of time. But here's the 5 we went over today. Have a plan, have a study partner, context matters, find a Bible version that works for you, and read it through a fresh lens. And if you do those and you're just desiring to have that great relationship with God, ultimately everything's going to work out and you're going to learn and you're going to start to understand things.
Yeah, and as you come across verses or whatnot that confuse you, pray them.
Mm-hmm.
I've encouraged my youth as we're reading the Psalms, pray through the Psalms, man. That's what some of them are, legit prayers. And so pray through that scripture. Ask God to open your eyes, open your hearts to kind of fill in the gaps.
There you go. Josh, you want to bring us home?
I think that's a pretty good point to end on right there. Just kind of, you got to do it on your own pace. If you are trying to please someone else with how much you should read the Bible or whatever, you have a bad time. I just really want to encourage you. This is you trying to connect with God better. And these tips are all helpful. You can use them. Again, but this is about you and God. And you're going to go at your own pace. And if you're still having trouble and you use these tips, there's no shame in that. If you're having trouble getting into it, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yep.
The Bible is a living, breathing Word of God. And you're going to read things, and you're going to find things that might confuse you. That's fine. Just remember, you're not in this walk alone. That's something we really want you guys to understand through this video and these videos. You're not alone. And so just keep trying. Keep working. And God's going to help you because God wants you to understand this word more too. And so with that, we're going to let you guys go. We love
We
you.
love you guys.
Stay safe out there.
Later, guys. Last word.
Beardmigo's out.
No, dude!
Wait, what's going on?